Greetings, Modernism in the Museum students. Welcome to week number 5 as we explore Alfred Barr and the Museum of Modern Art in more detail. What I want to focus on, what I want you to pay special attention as we focus this week's readings on Barr and the Museum of Modern Art is the power of the museum exhibition to create a narrative, an art historical narrative. And it's the power of of MoMA as an exhibition space in how it crafted its exhibitions that produced a kind of art historical narrative that cut across audiences, that provided a narrative for more general audiences, and also that narrative operated as a means to shape art historical research and the research that the Museum of Modern Art itself generated through the exhibition catalogs and the work of the scholarship of Alfred Barr and then William Rubin, Barr's successor as the director of the painting and sculpture department, and then also Kirk Varnedoe, who succeeded William Rubin, and is a particular hero of mine. He was the curator of director of painting and sculpture department at MoMA when I was going to graduate school, and an art historian that I admired very much. What is characteristic about Barr, Rubin, and Varnedoe is their interest in communicating the developments of modern art to broader publics, to not just focus attention on scholarship, but also to focus attention on expanding modern art scope, and that is expanding it and to show how the development of modern art is deeply relevant to understanding our world and deeply relevant in understanding the emergence of American culture in the 20th century. Now, an important part of the Museum of Modern Art is its focus, is its narrative, is its production of a narrative that de-emphasizes the political component of the development of modern art in favor of an aesthetic component. And that will be something that the critics of the Museum of Modern Art will focus attention on. The Museum of Modern Art also establishing this narrative, it establishes the important works of art and the important artists that play the constitutive roles, get on the main stage in this narrative, this drama of the development of modern art. And so it shapes a canon. And much of the work that has taken place subsequent to this MoMA narrative, you could say, work that was taking place in from the 1980s, the last few decades of the 20th century into the 21st, is on one hand initially expanding the canon, adding other artists, adding artists of color, artists of gender, artists whose work explores more explicitly political dimensions. The forgotten artists or the overlooked artists, going back through the canonical history, going back through the New York School and finding those women artists or those black artists or Latin American artists who had been overlooked, and moving through the various developments in the history of American art. But then also what's taken place with the turn of the new millennium is to redo the narrative, dismantle that narrative and reassemble it. is it possible that this museum space can offer a way to reassemble a narrative that's not only different but more inclusive? And what would that look like? And in fact, the Museum of Modern Art now is closing its permanent collection galleries and reorganizing them, renovating their spaces in order to generate and sustain a narrative that tells a different kind of story. Also, I want to draw your attention to the important role for BAR for education. For those of you that are educators, either working in museums or middle, high school, etc. The Museum of Modern Art was on the cutting edge from its very founding regarding its educational mission. And so the Department of Education was cutting edge in terms of how it incorporated the arts in understanding, how it incorporated the visual arts in understanding culture, and part of a broad liberal arts education, part of a broad education of a democratic citizenry, developing a public sphere for discourse about the most important democratic values. And I think that comes through in much of Barr's writing. I have a PDF article on Alfred Barr's art criticism. MoMA curator Kirk Varnedoe writes about Barr's notion of modernism. And this is something I think that's quite interesting, and I might spend some more time with you on it on Friday for my video chat. And that is that that Alfred Barr did not think about the Museum of Modern Art having a permanent collection, because it was a museum devoted to modernism, and modernism continued to move and to develop. That it moved through time, and works that were considered modern, like Gauguin and Cézanne in the late 19th century, by the mid-20th century, according to Barr, after about 75 years, those paintings became classics, and modernism continued to move forward. And so this is very interesting because it gets at the crux of art historical narratives coming up against or being affirmed by institutions. And there became a serious discussion by the mid-20th century about the Museum of Modern Art and whether it was going to establish a permanent collection, not just a permanent temporary collection. Barr's idea was that the work, after 75 years or so, the work in MoMA's collection could be transferred to a museum like the Met, which meant then that the collection was always evolving, always being culled, always moving into the future. But those collectors, whose collections had been lent to the Museum of Modern Art, wanted a permanent collection, wanted their work to be permanently celebrated. And so you begin to have this tension between the idea of modernism in art as something that's continually evolving, and instead you have an idea of modernism beginning someplace, say beginning with Gauguin and Cézanne. And so then stretching that narrative that always begins with Cézanne and Gauguin and Van Gogh, rather than one that just moves like a 75-year, what Barr called a torpedo, moving through time. So I may talk more about that in depth on Friday with my video chat, which will come to you from Los Angeles. I'll be in Los Angeles starting this Wednesday night through early Wednesday the 17th. I'm teaching Enrique Martinez Celaya's classes that he teaches at USC that week. He's going to be in Cuba for the Cuba Biennial, and He teaches a course at USC. His position is the provost professor of humanities and the arts, and he teaches one course a semester out of the English department. And this year he's been teaching a 2-semester course on Melville and Moby Dick, and so I'll be lecturing in his stead. If you guys are around, I would love in the LA area, and schedule can work out. Perhaps we can meet somewhere, and I would appreciate that and enjoy that very much. Write me, and perhaps even we could even schedule a time perhaps to visit a museum, as I think about it, on the weekend perhaps. I could give a time and a place, and maybe we can meet. That might be an interesting experience, right? Of course, given the fact that we're working through and exploring the modernism in the museum. Anyway, I may do some thinking about this and write you and see if, for those of you that are in the area and might be interested, let me know. I hope these comments are helpful to you. I think this week's at the University of Nebraska, I taught an entire semester-long seminar on the history of the Museum of Modern Art, and for my undergraduate class at the King's College, I taught a survey of the history of modern art through MoMA. I'm fascinated by MoMA. I think that it's an incredible institution, and how it makes manifest and embodies all of these issues about modernism in the museum and the aesthetic and political component of art is just fascinating to me. And I hope you share my enthusiasm, and I hope this week will be a provocative one for you. Have a great week. Take care.